Tennessee's relocation industry would pay actual money to bury this video, because in these 12 towns it isn't the town warning you off, it's the people already living there. And number 2 is a place you'd never expect. Let me be exact about what this list is, because it's the opposite of the usual one. Nothing here is a bad town. Every single one is genuinely desirable. That's the entire problem. These are the places retirees have already found, where the arrival of people exactly like you has changed something the people already there were trying to keep. And when locals are quietly unhappy about newcomers, that friction lands on you, every day, in 100 small ways nobody prices into a relocation budget. So I asked the same question in 12 towns. What do you wish people moving here understood? And I found a village where you cannot actually buy the land under your house, a town of 500 that hosts 50,000 visitors in one weekend, a whiskey distillery in a county where you can't buy a drink, and a place locals fought for decades to keep from becoming the town next door. If you're looking at any of these right now, hit that subscribe button before we start, because we're counting all 12 down, and you do not want to miss number 1. Let's count it down. Number 12, Portland, Tennessee. When I first drove into Portland, I was up on the Kentucky line in Sumner County, in a farm town that has spent the last decade absorbing people who couldn't afford anywhere closer to Nashville. Here's what people here will tell you. The arithmetic that makes this town attractive to you is the same arithmetic pricing out the children of the families who built it. When a house that a local young couple could have bought becomes a house an out-of-state buyer pays cash for, the couple doesn't move down the street. They leave the county. That's not resentment. That's a math problem with people inside it, and it compounds in a way that eventually reaches you. When the young families leave, the school loses enrollment, the volunteer fire roster thins, and the businesses that stayed open for working households close. The town you bought into keeps its buildings and loses its middle. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Portland. This town has held a strawberry festival every May since 1941, and it survived the collapse of the commercial strawberry industry that started it, and the festival simply kept going anyway. Here's your takeaway. In any town where you're paying cash and locals are borrowing, understand that you're not competing on price. You're winning by default, and the community notices. Number 11, Kingston Springs, Tennessee. When I first drove into Kingston Springs, I was in Cheatham County on the Harpeth River, 25 minutes from Nashville, in one of the prettiest small settings in Middle Tennessee. And here's the friction. Cheatham County has spent 30 years deliberately resisting becoming a Nashville suburb, with limited commercial development, no rush to widen roads, and zoning that keeps lots large. Newcomers arrive, fall in love with exactly that character, and then within 2 years start asking why there isn't a grocery store closer, or better internet, or a wider road. You moved here for the thing you're now asking them to change. I heard a version of this in half the towns on this list, and it's worth sitting with, because almost nobody thinks they'll be that person. The inconvenience feels charming on a visit, and grinding on a Tuesday in your 4th winter, and the petition to widen the road always seems reasonable to whoever just signed it. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Kingston Springs. At the narrows of the Harpeth, there's a tunnel blasted through solid rock around 1819 to power an iron forge, one of the earliest full-scale industrial tunnels in the United States, and you can still walk to it. Here's your takeaway. Before you move somewhere for its character, ask yourself honestly which parts of that character are inconveniences you'll be campaigning against by year 3. Number 10, Whitwell, Tennessee. When I first drove into Whitwell, I was in the Sequatchie Valley in Marion County, in a former coal town of about 1,600 people. What locals here will tell you is simpler than in the fancier towns on this list. This is a working community with a thin margin, and when outside money arrives, it doesn't lift everyone. It raises the assessment on the house of the retired miner next door who has been there 50 years and whose income did not change. A rising market is not good news if you weren't planning to sell. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Whitwell. In the late 1990s, the middle school here started collecting paper clips to help students understand the scale of the Holocaust. They ended up with more than 30 million of them, sent from around the world, and today a German railcar sits outside the school as a memorial. Documentary crews came. People still visit. A town of 1,600 built one of the most visited Holocaust memorials in the American South. Here's your takeaway. When you buy into a low-income community, your purchase price becomes a comparable sale. That comp raises your neighbor's assessments. It's worth knowing that you're doing it. Number 9, Spring City, Tennessee. When I first drove into Spring City, I was on Watts Bar Lake in Rhea County, in a town that has quietly become a retirement destination without ever advertising itself as one. and that's exactly what locals bring up. Retirees now make up a substantial share of this area, and the concern I heard isn't hostility, it's about a community where the median age keeps climbing, the school enrollment keeps falling, and the volunteer fire department keeps getting older. A town needs somebody who can carry a hose. That's not a figure of speech in rural Tennessee. A great many communities out here run volunteer fire departments, and a volunteer department needs people who can lift equipment, climb, and turn out at 3 in the morning. When the median age climbs past a certain point, response times lengthen, and eventually the insurance rating for the whole town follows them. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Spring City. The Watts Bar nuclear plant is right here, and its second reactor came online in 2016, the first newly built commercial nuclear reactor to enter service in the United States in the 21st century. Here's your takeaway. Ask what the median age of the town already is. If it's well above 50 and climbing, you're joining a community that may struggle to staff its own emergency services within your lifetime there. Number 8. Rugby, Tennessee. When I first drove into Rugby, I did not entirely believe what I was looking at. Victorian buildings, board and batten gables, and a library sitting in the woods of Morgan County on the Cumberland Plateau. Here's the local concern, and it's specific to preserved places. Rugby survives because a small number of people have spent decades maintaining it exactly as it was. That work is unpaid, unglamorous, and constant. When newcomers arrive expecting a finished attraction rather than a project needing hands, the burden doesn't shift. It concentrates further on the people already carrying it. You're not moving into a museum, you're moving into a volunteer roster. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Rugby. This colony was founded in 1880 by the English author Thomas Hughes, who wrote Tom Brown's School Days, as a settlement for the younger sons of British gentry who couldn't inherit at home. The library still holds thousands of original volumes from that era, largely untouched. An English utopian experiment in the Tennessee woods. Here's your takeaway. In any historic community, ask how many people actually do the work. If the answer is a dozen and their average age is 75, understand what you're being asked to join. Number 7. Cosby, Tennessee. When I first drove into Cosby, I was on the quiet northeastern edge of the Smokies in Cocke County, in the last stretch of that mountain range that hasn't been commercialized. Hasn't yet. That's the whole conversation here. What locals will tell you is that they've watched what happened 40 minutes southwest, and they are actively trying not to become it. Short-term rental conversion is the mechanism. Every cabin that becomes a nightly rental is a house a local family can't live in, and the county's housing stock only goes one direction. And there's a second-order effect people underestimate. A neighborhood that is half nightly rentals has no neighbors in it. Nobody notices the newspaper piling up. Nobody knows your car. Nobody checks on you after an ice storm. For a retiree living alone, that informal network is not a nice extra. It is the entire safety system. Nobody is watching a house full of strangers. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Cosby. This community was known for generations as the moonshine capital of the world, and it wore that reputation without much embarrassment. There are still legal distilleries here trading on a history that used to be a federal offense. Here's your takeaway. Ask what percentage of homes in the immediate area are short-term rentals. If it's climbing, the neighborhood you're buying into is being dismantled while you tour it. If you're hearing things nobody says in a relocation brochure, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who are running the same numbers. Number 6. Bell Buckle, Tennessee. When I first drove into Bell Buckle, I found about 500 people, a row of restored storefronts, and a railroad track running through the middle of it in Bedford County. Then I learned what happens here every June. The local concern in a town this small is scale. 500 residents can absorb a certain number of visitors and new arrivals. Past that number, the thing people came for stops existing. The shop owner knows everybody until she doesn't, and then it's just a shop. Small is not a marketing term here, it's a load limit. And the infrastructure is sized to match. Water systems, sewer capacity, the road grid, and the volunteer roster in a town of 500 were all built for a town of 500. Growth doesn't get absorbed here the way it does in a city, it gets paid for by everybody, through rates and taxes, usually within about 3 years of the subdivision opening. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Bell Buckle. This town hosts the RC Cola and Moon Pie Festival every June, which draws crowds that dwarf the population many times over, all built around a soft drink and a marshmallow sandwich cookie. Here's your takeaway. In a town under 1,000 people, one new subdivision is a demographic event. Ask how many building permits the town issued last year, and compare it to how many houses already exist. Number 5. Tellico Plains, Tennessee. When I first drove into Tellico Plains, I was in Monroe County at the foot of some genuinely serious mountains, at the western end of one of the best drives in the eastern United States. And here's the friction locals describe. This town's economy now depends substantially on people passing through, which means the businesses orient toward visitors rather than residents. That's fine when it's seasonal. It becomes a problem when the pharmacy, the hardware store, and the grocery are competing for rent against a place selling maps and t-shirts. A town can be prosperous and still not have anywhere to buy a socket wrench. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Tellico Plains. The Cherrohala Skyway starts here, a 43-mile mountain highway to North Carolina that took roughly 34 years to complete and cost around $100 million, built essentially for the view. 34 years. For a road with no town at either end. Here's your takeaway. Walk the main street of any tourism-dependent town and count how many businesses serve residents versus visitors. That ratio tells you what daily life will actually be like in February. Number 4. Lynchburg, Tennessee. When I first drove into Lynchburg, I found a courthouse square in Moore County, one of the smallest counties in Tennessee, absolutely packed with visitors. Here's what locals contend with. This town of roughly 600 people hosts hundreds of thousands of visitors a year because of one distillery. The square is built for tourists. Parking is a permanent negotiation. And the housing market reflects demand from people who want to live near a destination rather than from people who work here. 600 residents, hundreds of thousands of guests. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Lynchburg. Jack Daniels has operated here since the 1860s, and Moore County is dry. For most of the distillery's history, you could tour the place where the whiskey was made and not legally buy a glass of it anywhere in the county. The most famous whiskey in America, made in a county that wouldn't sell it. Here's your takeaway. In a one-attraction town, ask what happens if that attraction has a bad decade. Everything you're buying is downstream of a single business. The restaurants, the shops, the property values, and the tax base all move together because they're all really the same bet placed 12 different ways. Number 3. Leiper's Fork, Tennessee. When I first drove into Leiper's Fork, I understood the appeal within about a minute. Rolling Williamson County horse country, a general store, a couple of galleries, and no traffic light. And this is the town where the local concern is loudest, because it's been fought over for years. Residents here have organized repeatedly against development, against widening, against anything that would turn this village into the commercial corridors that consume the rest of Williamson County. They have largely won, and the result is that land here is extraordinarily expensive, because scarcity is the entire product. What people will tell you is that the newcomers who love it most are frequently the ones whose arrival threatens it, and that the community has learned to be wary of exactly that. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Leiper's Fork. This is an unincorporated village with no city government at all, which is precisely how residents want it. There's no council to lobby, and county-level zoning is the only lever anybody has. No mayor, no town hall. On purpose. Here's the takeaway. When a place has stayed unspoiled, somebody fought for that, repeatedly, at meetings for years. Find out who, and find out what they're worried about now. Number 2, Townsend, Tennessee. When I first drove into Townsend, the road sign told me what the town thinks of itself. The peaceful side of the Smokies. That is not a slogan somebody bought. It's a position, and it was taken deliberately. Townsend sits at one of the entrances to Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the most visited national park in America. It could have become what the other gateway towns became. It did not, because people here spent decades resisting exactly that. Fighting commercial development, keeping the valley low density, and accepting less money in exchange for keeping the place recognizable, which makes the local concern here sharper than anywhere else on this list. Every new arrival is a new vote on whether that resistance continues, and people who move here for the quiet have, more than once, turned out to want just a little more convenience than the quiet allows. Now here's the wildcard fact about Townsend. This valley was once the end of the Little River Railroad, one of the largest logging operations in the southern Appalachians. The line hauled out enormous quantities of timber from the mountains that are now a national park. The forest you drive through is second growth. All of it. The wilderness is younger than it looks, because they cut it once already. Here's the takeaway. Ask what the town said no to. Every genuinely pleasant small town has a list, and that list tells you more about its future than any listing sheet. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who does their homework before they buy. So do yourself a favor and hit that like button. Number 1. Sewanee, Tennessee. When I first drove into Sewanee, I was on the Cumberland Plateau in Franklin County in what looks like the most idyllic small college town in the American South. Stone Gothic buildings, 13,000 acres of forest, mountain views in every direction. And then somebody explained to me what buying a house here actually means. You do not own the land. Anywhere in Sewanee, on what's called the domain, the University of the South owns the ground. What you purchase is a leasehold, you own the structure, and your interest in that structure is subject to a ground lease from the university. That is a fundamentally different thing from what everybody watching this assumes they're buying. And it comes with terms. Ground rent on leases issued after 2011 runs at 4% of the lot's appraised value as determined by the county assessor, and it is not frozen, so as values rise, your ground rent rises with them. Every transfer of a lease must be approved by a lease committee, which meets about once a month. Mortgages require the university's consent on the deed of trust. And changes to your own property, additions, fences, sheds, tree removal, significant landscaping, even exterior paint colors, go before that committee. Your paint color, before a committee. Now here's the wildcard fact about Sewanee. This arrangement is old enough that it reached the Supreme Court of the United States in 1908 in a case about whether those leasehold interests could be taxed at all. Your future front porch has case law attached to it. And I want to be fair, because this is not a trap and nobody hides it. The university publishes all of it, and thousands of people live here happily under exactly these terms. The community is close, the setting is extraordinary, and many leaseholders would not trade it. But it is the single most misunderstood housing arrangement in this state, and if you are 70 years old putting most of what you have into a house, you need to understand you are not buying land. You are buying permission, renewable, governed, and reviewed by a committee that meets monthly. And of everything on this list, it's the one I'd most want somebody to have explained to me before I made an offer. Every town here is a genuinely good place, and I'll say it one more time. This list exists because these towns are desirable, not because they aren't. But here's the pattern in all 12. Every one of these places is the way it is because somebody protected it. A festival, somebody keeps running. A road somebody refused to widen. A valley somebody fought over. A university that decided a century ago never to sell the ground. What you're buying in a town like this isn't just a house, it's a seat in an ongoing argument you didn't start. The town you fell in love with is somebody's unfinished work. So go in as a neighbor rather than a customer. Ask what the town said no to. Ask who does the volunteer work. Ask what the last big fight was about and who won. And then, before you close, ask the one question almost nobody asks. What do people here wish newcomers understood? They will tell you. That's the remarkable part. They almost always tell you. If this gave you a better question to ask, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you're a local in one of these 12, tell me in the comments what you wish retirees knew before they arrived. I'd rather hand people your answer than mine. If this one hits 10,000 likes, I'll do a part 2 on the Tennessee towns that are actively asking retirees to come. I'll see you in the next.